Hi, folks. I am Christine Hutchinson, and I represent these three organizations that are pictured here, and am always on board to talk about Black farmers in New York State and in the Northeast, because that is my current work. It's been my heart work for a long time, and now I actually am able to do this on a day-to-day basis as part of my job. Um, when I received the first communication from Michael, I I pride myself on being a tough guy and never crying, but I actually was kind of brought to tears because I saw this beautiful work happening that I really, really wanted to be a part of, but I knew that I don't have the capacity to be part of it in the meaningful way I would like to, because I work for the land trust and I teach and I also run our core, and there just is not enough time in the day. And I said all the things that I've been doing around Black farmers and land and food sovereignty, this one really hits home because I actually am from this area. I was actually born in Troy, and I grew up in the Capital District. And when we speak about Black folks in Waterville, my family probably constituted the greatest part of that percentage because they were in Waterville, and then moved to Troy, and some of us still linger in Waterville as well. So it really hit home. I spoke with one of my aunts about Black farmers in this area, and she was telling me about this farmer named Pansy who had this farm right near where I went to college in Loudonville. And it's really bittersweet for me to not be able to be fully involved in this, but I'm always very curious. I'm looking at these artifacts, and it means a lot to me. So I appreciate the fact that this work is being done. So I give a thank you for that. And that being said, um, I'll move forward. So I'm always trying to answer the question of whether Black farmers can thrive. And I try to approach this with optimism, which is really difficult in this moment with what's happening in our political landscape. But as a card carrying optimist, I find ways of being optimistic despite all these challenges that most of them we know about to some degree, but these are some of those factors that have led to this decline of Black farmers. As Michael mentioned, we had more Black farmers in the 1920s than we do now. Black farmers have lost 90% of the land that they once owned in the United States. I would be remiss to not acknowledge that this is all indigenous land. And when I say owned, I understand that I'm saying with a caveat that it has been taken sometimes by force, sometimes by treaty, many of which have been violated. But I just want to acknowledge that. Financial discrimination is a key factor in the fact that so many Black farmers have stopped farming, and the generations behind them were not willing or able to go into farming, leading to that decline. Rural violence is one of the factors, being isolated out in these distant spaces and having to deal with the repercussions of neighbors who really don't want you there and want to have what you have. That land loss comes from these things and others, but decreasing sizes of properties as farmers struggle to stay afloat, markets collapsing. We've had multiple farming crises in the United States, and the response for Black farmers has not been what the response has been for farmers. And all of this is bolstered by government policy. Some of the government policies that have led to Black land loss and the decline in number of Black farmers are go all the way back to the Homestead Acts, where land has been given through multiple Homestead Acts over many years to farmers so that they could go into those spaces and do the hard work of settling it. And hundreds of millions of acres were given at little to no cost to farmers, creating a legacy for them and their families of farming. And 1.5 million people got property through that process. 6,000 of those people were Black. So even from the beginning, from the earliest days that Black people were able to own land, they were denied participation in this system that's really bolstered all of our farmers. We've all heard about 40 acres and a mule, and upon emancipation, people who were enslaved were promised that they would get the means to survive. 40 acres and a mule wasn't just for fun, that was how people made their living. And in some cases, 40 acres and a mule was given, but a few years after it was given, it was taken away and returned to the people who had previously owned that land. Subsidies. Farming in America doesn't exist without subsidies, and very little of the subsidies that are given to farmers go to Black farmers. Most of the subsidies go to the largest of farmers, and there is no trickle down. Very little goes to small farmers, and for Black farmers, they tend to be small farmers, and they get even less than other small farmers with similar acreage. One of the mechanisms for these unequal subsidies is that they are decided based on size. So it's a way of inserting a discrimination into a policy that seems on paper like it wouldn't be. But if I say, well, we're going to give this pool of money, the vast majority of it is going to go to farmers who have 200 acres, and there are no Black farmers with 200 acres, you're not giving any of these subsidies to Black farmers. Heirs property is a contemporary and historic issue where if folks own property and they pass away without a clear succession of where that land goes and it's split amongst multiple heirs, someone can come in and entice one of those heirs who now own the property to sell. And if that one heir wants to sell, it forces a sale of the property. And the developers have come in over and over again and forced those sales and taken that property away. And this is a state level situation. And when people think about it, they think it's just down south, but it's not just down south, it's here as well. There's been a lot of work in Massachusetts to address this, and we have to catch up here in New York for the few farmers that we have left. Eminent domain, we know the state can come and take land for the greater good, and sometimes the greater good ends up being for the good of individuals. Land is taken, a fair market price is paid, and there's no say from those farmers who own that land what happens to that land afterward. So I think we just had a depiction of what probably was eminent domain. And sometimes it's not just a chunk of the land, sometimes it's the bulk of it, sometimes it's so much of it that the land is no longer worth having. Going into rural violence a bit as well, because that is at the forefront of my mind. This is happening now. This is not just something that happened in, 1930 down south. This is something that we are dealing with in this moment. It could include any of these things on this list and probably a million others that we haven't dreamed up. But I just want to, because I'm time limited, speak to a particular case of rural violence that is happening right now. There is a Black farmer in central New York, please look it up, Amanda David, who has been struggling with her next door neighbor who does not want her to be there. And his attacks include the least of them is name calling and putting up signage on his property that says, I love the Second Amendment. The harassment from him has reached the height where he's shot a gun over her property. He's shooting out her security lights and cameras. He's yelling at her children. And this is something that has been going on for years. Within my organization, we've been working and trying to support her and pushing back for years. The authorities did nothing. I've read the police reports where the police said, we're out here again because this man is doing the same thing that he did when I personally was out here 4 months ago. They're acknowledging in their reports that this is ongoing, but why isn't it stopping? Why does this man get to court and the judge says, well, I'm not going to take your guns away. I want you to be able to bag a deer. Why does this man get all this leniency when he is harassing, threatening, and intimidating a person who has done nothing to him? They're still battling this situation in court right now. And we all know about like cross burnings on lawns and things like that. If you're in a rural area and you're by yourself, you're not going to stay there too long when your life is being threatened, when you have kids and you want your kids to live on. Um, so please do look into that particular case. There are others as well. Financial discrimination includes USDA loan discrimination. And again, farming relies on credit. Every farmer relies on a credit system. It's the nature of the business. It's a written and unwritten promise that the United States has made to farmers that they will work financially with farmers in order to keep them afloat and keep them going. So when you see that Black farmers are denied USDA loans in New York State at a rate that is multitudes beyond what white farmers or average farmers are denied, don't just think, well, they shouldn't be relying on credit. They should just save up. Nobody does that. So Black farmers shouldn't have limited access to the same resources that other farmers have. Redlining, which we know created ghettos and did not allow Black people to access loans to buy in particular areas, that didn't just extend to cities and how the areas of cities were designated for particular people. It extended to loan products as a whole. So even when people went to banks instead of the USDA to try to get loans to buy land, those policies that were attached to redlining has kept them from being able to buy. Increased costs for credit, asking for extraordinary collateral. Again, this is something that's happening right now. Someone within our Black agriculture community wanted to purchase land with a group of people, all credit-worthy people, professors, professionals, and they were asked to put up an unreasonable amount of collateral in order to get the loan to purchase the land. This happens all the time. Manipulation of property values. If you want to buy a house, if you want to buy a piece of property, it needs to be above the value of the money that's being asked for it. So if an appraisal comes in and it's $1 below, you don't get the loan for that. And that value manipulation can work in both ways. When you're being assessed for taxes, you don't want your property value to be high, but those things are manipulated. This is specific to New York State. This agriculture is a massive industry in New York State, and you can see on the left a visual depiction of who is out there farming. And in case you can't see it, the big circle, that is white folks. Asian folks are blue, and Black farmers are the little orange dot right there. And their presence, their diminished presence, is reflected financially as well. The top figure, Black farmers are annually netting negative $903, which means people are working other jobs, as many farmers do across races. They're working other jobs to support their farms, but Black folks at a much higher rate than others. And I just want to give a second for you to take a look at the stats. Most of these are from the 2017 to 2022 Ag Census. The Ag Census is put out by the USDA. They survey every farmer trying to gather information, and these stats are a result of the input. So despite these obstacles, despite how difficult it is, despite the fact that even if you build a legacy, sometimes your children will look at the factors around it and nope out, there are people who want to farm. There are people who love farming. And in New York State, Black people have been here and love farming since the 1600s. I knew that was going to happen. I'm sorry. So that image that I hope I can get back, I can't get it back. That image, I'll try and play it again, shows the numbers of Black farmers, other farmers as well, but Black farmers in the United States broken down by state from 1900 through the 1960s. And if you look really quickly on the right, you can see that in 1900 there were 443 farmers, Black farmers in New York State, and that number diminished to 117 by the 60s. Those stats are reflected in part here. So in 1910, we had already gone from 440 some odd to 295. In 2010, there were 139. I started really engaging in work for farmers And a little bit after this stat came about, but the numbers were still pretty much the same. And it was really shocking to me when I saw that, especially as compared to the population of Black people in New York State, which is on the left, and to the numbers of farmers. We have over 50,000 farmers, and 161 of them are Black. I actually am really proud of that number, 161, because in the 2017 Ag Census, it was still hovering at that 139. And I think that it is through the work of these organizations, some of which I'm a part of, some of which I just admire, that we have been able to keep more Black farmers farming. So obviously, the institutions that have existed since the early 1900s and from later were not serving Black farmers. They were not keeping Black farmers in the business. They were not associating with Black farmers. And so many of us, myself included, who wanted to farm, I was a poultry farmer, found that when reaching out to the organizations that should have helped us, we were not getting help. More often than not, we're just simply ignored. But sometimes it's more blatant, where you may ask for an application for a program or for information or for someone from the CCE to come out to your farm to give technical assistance, which is something that they do for farmers, and it doesn't happen. I had never had a person from any of those organizations come out to see my farm, come out to help me, even when I was struggling and I had questions. I did not receive help. And that's the same story for so many of us. So in response to that, as we do, we created our own. And these organizations that you see here are some of the organizations that were created to support particularly BIPOC or Black farmers. So each of these organizations has come together as part of an ecosystem to work together to support the farmers who have been ignored for decades. Those same orgs that we're spinning are right there on the left. Farm School NYC, Soul Fire Farm, Black Farmers United, Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust, Black Farmer Fund, and Corbin Hill Food Project. These organizations were founded separately, but came together in 2020 to combine their efforts and work together to better support farmers. You can't farm in isolation. Just like the individual farmers out there in central New York who feel like they are alone and there are not people there who support them and who will back them up, these organizations were out there on their own as well and have come together to work together for the greater good of Black farmers. Each org has a niche. We have education and training, which is mostly Soul Fire and Farm School. Black Farmers United does education as well, but also does advocacy, political advocacy, organizational advocacy. Northeast Farmers of Color is working on land access directly, holding land. Black Farmer Fund works on access to capital, and Corbin Hill Food Project works on marketing and distribution. And in my mind, this is the day that Black Farmers United was created. One of our elders in agriculture, Karen Washington, aka Mama K, who's standing there next to Baba Dennis, I wish I had that pointer. She sent out an email and said, I have the commissioner of New York State Ag and Markets coming. Come out and talk to him. Tell him what Black farmers need. And we had a series of conversations where we tried to tell him, thank you. We tried to tell him what Black farmers needed. And this particular okay, got it. So that's Mama Kay, and that's Baba Dennis. This particular conversation was our third. And at the end of that conversation, I remember feeling defeated rather than hopeful, feeling like the things that we were saying were not being heard. And you can tell by the fact that I was not able to muster up a smile. I was very done, and I was ready and willing to jump in and do the work in some other way. And A number of people did feel the same way, and these people who were there in this room started Black Farmers United. And instead of just saying, this is a problem, here is a problem, we work together to come up with solutions. And this is what we call our 9 solutions. These are the pillars for Black Farmers United. These are all of the things that we know need to be done to reverse the trend of decline in Black farming. And it's creating pathways for farmers who want to become farm owners, and maybe they're farm workers or maybe they're students, supporting the Black Farmer Fund to make sure capital is ready, putting land into the hands of Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust, creating certificate programs for people who are farm workers or farmers because they need to demonstrate their knowledge in a different way. A legacy farmer has like an intrinsic trust that he knows what he's doing because you know his father, so you know he knows these things. Our fathers aren't doing this, so people don't know that we can do these things. So we need something on paper to say, yeah, I can farm. Supporting urban farms, having navigators, Black navigators through the Farmland Navigator Program, scholarships for students who want to pursue agriculture. This is key because if we don't get our young people into agriculture, we don't have farmers. Our average farmer age is like 55. We're ready to retire when we hit 60. We need people to replace us. Data collection. There's not adequate information at the state and federal level about Black farmers. And then altogether, a comprehensive plan that puts all these pieces together and any other pieces that are missing. So those are the 9 solutions. Corbin Hill Food Project. So this is an organization that moves food through New York State. They have multiple outlets, particularly in the city. They look to serve people who have limited food access, but they're also about uplifting the business of farming, making sure that purchasing benefits the farmers, creating retail and wholesale pipelines for farmers to be able to move their produce throughout our state. Black Farmer Fund is really about capital. They started with a pilot community to decide who was going to be funded. So they raised some funds and then they needed to disperse them. So they got a pilot community and they pulled individual people, as you can see, from different areas around New York State. Some of them farmers, some of them farm adjacent. And that pilot community, they were not bankers. They were not people who had been distributing money for years. They were just people who were in the community who understood the needs. And Black Farmer Fund worked with these people to teach them what they needed to know to make these decisions about disbursement of funding. So the entire model of funding through Black Farmer Fund is different than what you're going to find at Farm Credit East or your local bank or even the USDA. They work on building relationships, figuring out where the farmers are in terms of their financial health, helping them get to the point that they can take a loan and be able to pay it. And they create this, what they call patient capital. They know that for farmers in December, you're not making any money. So they structure repayment so that there's not a payment in December. They understand that catastrophes hit, so they have a little reserve for emergency funds for their farmers. So this pilot community really started from scratch and they figured out how this thing was going to work. They laid the groundwork so that the Black Farmer Fund could continue on and have an investment community that operated in similar ways to that pilot community to continue funding these farmers. One thing that did happen is they didn't end up just funding farmers. They funded farmers, that 40% that's green there, but other businesses that are adjacent to the farmers, because you may farm and grow food, but your food needs to go somewhere. So they're looking at restaurants. They're looking at people who create what you call value-added goods, and they're supporting them as well. Farm School NYC teaches people who don't yet know how to grow. It teaches people to be farmers. These are some of the things that they teach, the courses they teach on the left. And their keystone program is the citywide program. They have a 1-year program where people can come in. not as farmers, and they leave ready to go onto a piece of land and work that land. And Soulfire Farm, some of us in this room may know them because they're right up the road here. Soulfire has been doing farmer immersion training where people can come into that space and spend a week just buried deep in farming and farm work and food justice and food access and take their first step toward becoming a farmer. They run other programming where they feed people in the capital region.
Where is that located?
They're in Grafton, New York. If you go to, Grafton, that's where they are. They have community days where people can come and work on the farm. They do events there. They have a camping event there. They really create a lot of opportunities for people who have not been connected to farming to connect. And they support their people beyond their immersions. They have a Braiding Seeds Fellowship, which takes in, I think it's 12 people who want to become farmers, and they support them on that journey. It's a paid fellowship. They get paid $50,000 over the course of a year and a half to pursue creating their own farm projects. Soulfire in the city, they put garden beds in people's yards. People would like to grow their own food, and they bring you seedlings. And when you get stuck, they'll help you figure out what the problem is in your garden so that you can be successful. And Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust, that is where I work, is one of the places I work. And this entity was started by people of color throughout the Northeast who were living in isolation and subject to some of those things that I had mentioned before. It was, let's get together and break this isolation. And as they were together breaking the isolation, when they talked about the problems they faced as farmers, land access, permanent land tenure repeatedly came up as the primary issue. So somebody, hallelujah, said, let's start a land trust. And that would be in 2017, 2018, that idea came to fruition and people started working toward creating this land trust. And now a land trust exists. These on the left are the strategies that NEFOC uses to create an equitable, permanent, accessible land tenure for farmers, including Indigenous consultation, because we understand, as I said in the beginning, how we all got to this land. And it's important to help rebuild the relationships that Indigenous people have had with their land. So instead of just getting a piece of land and doing X with it, who are the Indigenous people who were here? What do they want to do with the land? Uh, Lots of different resources for farmers, some training, some financial, some just communal. Let's get together, be at peace together, policy advocacy. We work on climate justice. And as far as the land access goes, these notes here, these 5 things, are ways of acquiring land for farmers or connecting farmers to land. These are some of the pieces of work that we have in progress. And I want to highlight 2 projects that I think are really dope, that make me excited. The one on the left is my project. That is my baby, On the Way. Black farmers, Black aspiring farmers, traveling from one Black farm to the next, completing projects to support the farms there. We were able to do this in October of 2024. I dreamed about it for over 2 years before that, and it was mostly amazing. Going to these farms that are mostly in rural spaces, the farmers were just glad to have us there to start with, not to mention the fact that we were getting projects done, but just to be in community is so important. They appreciated it. And then on the right, this one is not my baby, but our org did this, We the Land, which was a conference for BIPOC farmers, land stewards, people who sought to be more connected to the land. And it was the most loving and well thought out and caring conference I've ever been to, and I've been to a lot of conferences. So I just want to uplift those and keep them on the radar. We're going to do On the Way again in 2026. Could not repeat it again this year because it was a lot. The tour was documented, and the documentary will be coming out when we finish it. And these are URLs for some of the orgs that I represent, some of the ecosystem orgs. That QR code is for a fundraiser that we are doing to support the orgs and farmers who have had their funding snatched away. Black Farmers United was actually planning a conference that was supposed to happen at the beginning of this month, and they got a stop work order. We're not paying for this. We're not reimbursing the expenses you've incurred. You can stop working on this from the NRCS, which is a USDA agency. So they had to cancel the contract. Excuse me, had to cancel the conference, unfortunately. But we are determined to put that conference on next year with or without USDA support. And that's all I have.